Hello and welcome to Restoration DIY. In this episode I'll be doing something a bit different. Instead of a bowl, I'll be making a shallow dish using sections of yew cast into epoxy resin. So without further ado, let's get into it. I've had these bits of yew for a while now and it was time to put them to good use. I cut 3 lengths into 55mm pieces. In total I ended up with about 14 usable sections. I figured I would need around a dozen. The mould I'm using is a silicone baking tray for cakes, but I reckoned if it could deal with the heat of an oven, then it should be okay with the heat of curing resin. I began with arranging the sections of yew, placing one of the bigger ones in the middle and placing the rest around the edge. After a bit of shuffling around, I used wooden mixing sticks and super glue to hold them in place. Supergluing the mixing sticks to the yew sections is intended to keep them all in place and stop them floating around, and it would also act as a bridge for the weight to sit on. A quick dry run confirmed I wouldn't be able to lift the mould full of resin into the pressure pot liner, so I had to put it in first, then I mixed the epoxy. After a quick measure up, I worked out I would need around 3 batches of resin. I used my preferred brand, mixed at a 2:1 ratio, 150 grams of part B to 300 grams of part A. The colour of choice was purple. After adding the colourant, each batch was thoroughly mixed, after which all 3 were poured straight into the mould. I'm not going to show them all being mixed. Once the mould was filled, I added some weight to hold the yew sections down and placed the whole thing in the pressure pot. And with the lid tightly screwed down, I added the usual 50 to 55 psi and I left it overnight to cure. It's a few days later and the blank is cured with no visible cracks or voids. I was a bit concerned as to how I would hold it because it was quite thin, but the wood worm screw was just the right size, so I marked the centre and drilled an 8mm hole, using tape on the drill bit so I didn't go too deep. I fixed the blank to the lathe in the usual way, first getting the screw started, then I used a locking pin to hold the chuck in place whilst I tightened it down, not forgetting the tailstock to hold it securely in place. I turned the lathe up to about 1000 RPM, but there was a bit of vibration, so I turned it down to around 750 RPM and then I started to remove material. Using the EasyWood Tools full-size finisher, I started to cut away the excess, getting the blank to round and balanced. And once that was done, I could then concentrate on the underside, removing more resin to expose the pieces of yew. At this point I really didn't know how the finished piece would look. I was thinking maybe a shallow bowl or a platter with an OG shaped underside. So initially I kept my options open and didn't remove too much. After a quick check, I could see there was just one bit of resin left, so I made a few passes with a carbide. Then, exploring the shallow bowl design, I used a large negative rate scraper to form a radius on the bottom edge, just to see how it looked. With the lathe stopped, I had a closer look at the shallow bowl idea and thought better of it. Maybe next time. So I moved on to cutting the mortise. I used the 1/4" parting tool to define the outer edge of the mortise and also the outer edge of the slightly raised foot. After that, I used the mid-size finisher to remove the inner material, then the dovetail cutter to cut the dovetail. Mortise done, I continued shaping the underside, this time using a 3/8 bowl gouge. The reason I didn't do a shallow bowl was because the blank just wasn't deep enough. This also meant the platter idea wouldn't work either, so this is where I made my mind up to do something more like a shallow dish. Using the gouge, I got it to roughly the shape I was looking for, then I switched to a large negative rate scraper to remove the heavier tool marks, and after a final check, I used a skew chisel to blend and fair all the curves together. And with the underside done, I sanded from 80 to 3000 grit, leaving the tailstock support in place for as long as possible before turning the last piece away and sanding that to a fine finish. All sanded, next I cleaned down with denatured alcohol, then I applied the finish, and as usual I'll skip through this bit and show the process in detail at the end. After turning the workpiece around and fixing it to the 4-jaw chuck, I began hollowing out, and for peace of mind, I used the tailstock for added support. I used a 3/8 bowl gouge to get rid of the uneven surface, but the shards of resin were really stinging the back of my hand, so it wasn't long before I put a glove on. I continued removing material till I reached a nice flat surface, then I switched to the full-size carbide cutter. There were a few low sections in the rim, so I cut away the material until they had gone. This then gave me the finished height of the rim to work to. With that done, I turned my attention to the centre part of the dish. The carbide cutter was great for quickly removing the parts that were mostly resin, but it struggled a bit when it came to the end grain in the U. So for the outer part, I switched to shear scraping with a bowl gouge. Doing this meant I didn't have to put as much pressure on the workpiece, and it gave me a much better finish. thought I'd try the gouge on the resin, but that just created more chipping, so I went back to the carbide to cut through it, and with that mostly gone, I cut away the centre support. The piece in the centre was mostly wood, so the gouge had no problem cutting it away, gradually thinning it down until it broke off. Then I blended and faired the surface with a large negative rate scraper. Once I was happy with the shape of the inside, I sanded with 80 grit to check for any low spots and faint ridges. The rim needed a bit of work from the skew chisel as well to flatten it off. Then I finished sanding from 80 to 3000 grit. Sanding done, I cleaned down with denatured alcohol. Then I applied 2 coats of sanding sealer, each one denibbed with a non-abrasive Scotch pad. Next up, Yorkshire grit, a single coat, thoroughly cleaned away until no more residue is picking up on the paper towel. Then the resin polishing. First, Mirka Polar Shine 10, a single coat, also thoroughly cleaned away, ready for the fine polishing compound. Polar Shine 5, a single coat, cleaned away to leave a deep shine. And to finish, Hampshire Sheen Gloss Finishing Wax, 2 coats to seal and protect the surface. And that's it, another project finished. I like the way this one turned out. The purple resin set against the yellow U sections is very striking, and I hope you like it as well. This is the first project I've uploaded since I made it to 1000 subs, so I'd like to thank you all. I couldn't have done it without you. But this is just the beginning, so if you haven't already, could I ask you to smash that like button, subscribe, and comments are always welcome. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.